representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Please join me to welcoming pretty children, the future of the Republic of Korea. After this gentle introduction, it's time to welcome our first speaker, Ms. Susan Hopgood, who is the President of Education International. Madame Hopgood, please join me on stage.
Madame Bokova, distinguished guests. Let me start by thanking our hosts, the Government of the Republic of Korea, for their generous hospitality this week. Let me also thank and recognise UNESCO for its role and leadership to ensure free, inclusive, quality education and lifelong learning for all. Education International stands ready to work with UNESCO and the greater education community to ensure the provision of 12 years of publicly funded, equitable, free, quality primary and secondary education, of which at least 9 years are compulsory, and at least 1 year of free and compulsory quality pre-primary education. We also commit to working together for the achievement of lifelong learning and education and training opportunities for the large population of out-of-school children and adolescents who require targeted and sustained action, ensuring that all children are in school and are learning. The last 2 days have reminded us of our unfinished agenda, underscoring the urgency required to achieve quality education for all and the cost of inaction. As each year passes, we fail another generation of our children. Where the political will exists, we can achieve our goals. This can happen. We call on governments to fulfil their obligations to properly and adequately fund free, quality public education. This obligation cannot be outsourced. We will continue to advocate for the allocation of at least 6% of GDP and 20% of national budgets to education. Education International, the voice of over 30 million teachers and education workers in more than 170 countries, affirms our commitment to fulfil our professional responsibilities to students and the communities we serve. Teachers and education workers are central to achieving our shared goals. We all agree that every student has the right to quality free public education. However, in order to realise our educational goals, students in every classroom around the world must be guaranteed a well-trained, professionally qualified, motivated and supported teacher. Providing quality education for all will require changes to education systems. To implement the Education 2030 Framework for Action and improve the quality of education, it is fundamental that our education systems are transformed into ones that foster an open and collaborative culture. They must promote well-being and continuous improvement instead of high-stakes competition that creates winners and losers. Quality is rendered meaningless when the permanent stress of failure and rankings extinguishes the spark of curiosity and the joy of learning. It is also fundamental that we institutionalise inclusive, meaningful social dialogue with all actors and stakeholders, including civil society. By fostering a shared vision with students, parents and educators, we can achieve a shared understanding and a shared ownership of education reform. If mutually agreed reforms succeed, societies transform. And finally, it is critical that governments both significantly and immediately increase investment in education and better target funding. This is essential to close the disparities and inequities between and within countries, and between all students, regardless of their background and their circumstances. As we close the World Education Forum, Let us take our collective commitments forward to ensure the adoption and implementation of this bold plan to achieve quality education for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hopgood, for emphasizing the critical role of teachers. Indeed, without a sufficient number of well-trained teachers, we cannot achieve our goal. And now I would like to invite Mr. Kishore Singh, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to education, to share his remarks. Mr. Singh.
Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education of Republic of Korea, Director General of UNESCO, Ministers of Education, Excellencies, distinguished participants. On 8 September last year, the Open Working Group on Sustainable Development submitted to the United Nations General Assembly their proposals on Sustainable Development Goals. Goal number 4 being, by 2030, ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education. Today, our 3 days discussions at the World Education Forum, culminating in the Declaration and Framework of Action, have provided a broader vision of future education agenda, with fundamental responsibility of governments for the implementing this declaration, along with comprehensive national monitoring and evaluation systems. The principles of right to education were at the forefront when discussions at this forum were initiated, and I would like to applaud the importance attached to the right to education, vision and political will, I quote from declaration, reflected in international and regional human rights conventions that stipulate right to education, unquote. I would like also to commend the position articulated by NGOs, and their work in upholding right to education. The declaration and the framework of action adopted today is a bedrock for our individual and collective endeavor for the progressive realization of the right to education in the spirit of our human rights obligations. As we embark on future education agenda, we have a heavy responsibility. Governments must preserve education as a public good and protect it against forces of privatization, commercializing education. They must make highest public investment in education as a foundation for human development. They must foster humanistic mission of education rather than its mere utilitarian role. We must also recognize that empowering role of education is of foremost importance in lifting more than 1.3 billion people who are victims of poverty today. In carrying out my functions as United Nations Special Rapporteur on Right to Education, I remain fully engaged with the states for achieving education for all agenda, and I look forward with great interest and commitment to working together with governments as well as with UNESCO, UNICEF, and other United Nations agencies for the realization of right to education as a follow-up to this World Education Forum. We must always uphold right to education as a fundamental human right, a right which is of which both individual and society are beneficiaries, and a right which is essential for the exercise of all other human rights. I call upon all governments to ensure full realization of right to education. It is not only their international legal responsibility, it is also a moral imperative, and we must work collectively for the benefit of present and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. We're counting on your cooperation and support in our efforts to promote the right to education. Our next speaker is Mr. Mohamed Amar, the Ambassador and the Permanent Delegate of the Arabic Republic of Egypt to UNESCO, and he's also the Chairperson of the Executive Board of UNESCO. Ambassador Amar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Tang. Excellencies, honorable ministers, Madam Director General of UNESCO, ladies and gentlemen. As a chairperson of the Executive Board of UNESCO, let me congratulate you all for the successful completion of the World Education Forum. The last few days have been intense. Meetings, side events, panel discussions, and plenary sessions, during which governmental and non-governmental representatives from every corner of the globe have had the opportunity to share their experiences, challenges, and successes. What is most encouraging is the fact that everyone shared their stories to prove that with a determination of efforts on the part of national and local governments in collaboration with NGOs and other implementing partners, education for all can and is a reality. Despite these successes, we must all remain attentive. We must ensure that quality, accessible education for all remains a reality for everyone, everywhere, and always. Our discussions during the past 3 days have shown us that many of the goals included in the EFA and MDG agendas are successfully achieved. I still believe that as we strive to accomplish the remaining EFA and MDG goals, this will put us on the right path toward the SDGs. Quality education is a fundamental human right. Policymakers and civil society organizations must ensure that that right flourishes. As a public good for the benefit of humanity, together we must ensure that education helps to encourage open, friendly, and honest dialogue amongst all people everywhere. We must celebrate the transformational power of education and make sure that we offer educational opportunities to every girl and boy, woman and man, and that we provide also equality of opportunities for those who have and those who are less advantaged. Finally, we must reinforce that fact that without education, there can be no peace, no development, nor the fulfillment of human rights. Without innovative and relevant quality education, there can be no sustainable development, nor can there be employment opportunities for today's youth in tomorrow's green economy. Education, ladies and gentlemen, is at the heart of sustainable development. UNESCO's Executive Board, as a governing body of the organization, has been closely involved and has provided strong support to all the processes and key international events leading to this World Education Forum. We have welcomed and encouraged the Secretariat, and in particular, the Director General, Mrs. Irina Bokova, for her leadership and determination in securing education's rightful place as the foundation of all sustainable development initiatives. And we will continue to provide our support as we progress toward the final adoption of the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda in New York, when the United Nations adopted the SDGs and its corresponding financing framework. Members of the Executive Board, many of whom have participated in the deliberation during this forum, are strongly committed to continue our support to UNESCO and to the Director General for the overall follow-up of this important gathering, thus making sure that agreed goals and targets will be met for the benefit of all member states and peoples. Lastly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me say that the Executive Board of UNESCO warmly welcomes the historic significance of this meeting, which has demonstrated that education is at the heart of a better future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Amer, for being with us here today to represent UNESCO's governing bodies. Now it's an honor for me to introduce the Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact, Mr. Georg Kell. Mr. Kell.
Thank you very much, distinguished Minister, Excellencies, Director General of UNESCO, delegates. My sincere congratulations for a very successful forum, for a historic breakthrough, making education a top priority. I'm speaking here to you today on behalf of the UN's initiative for engaging with the private sector, the United Nations Global Compact, mobilizing 8,300 corporations in more than 145 countries, organized in 88 local networks. I'm here today to testify to you that the private sector is willing to be a critical partner with you and to help in the implementation. Already, some years ago, we worked with UNESCO, with UNICEF and other partners to establish a framework for private sector engagement. And more recently, we realized that the private sector everywhere recognizes that education is the top priority. Survey after survey confirms that business wants the right skills, wants higher level of education, and is respecting the notions of equity and is willing to support governments in leveling up education as a top priority issue. So I'm here today to pledge to you, as the world community is gearing up to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals in September, to roll out all our capacities to engage the private sector in support of this important agenda. Finally, let me salute the Director General of UNESCO, Irina, for having pioneered successfully partnerships with the private sector, and pledge that we stand ready to work with her and all our partners in the UN family to make this a reality. Thank you very much and congratulations again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kell, for your commitment and also your words of support. And now allow me to invite you to watch a special video message from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and I'm sorry I was not able to join you at this landmark event to set the agenda for ensuring safe and quality education for every child, young person and adult by 2030. The need for education in the midst of crisis has never been more urgent than now. More people are forcibly displaced by conflict and persecution than at any other time in recent history, and many of them for years and even decades. 50% of the world's refugees are under 18. And I have met hundreds of these girls and boys, and they all told me that education is their greatest hope for the future. But only 1 in 2 refugee children go to primary, and only 1 in 4 to secondary school. And without an education, They won't develop the skills they will need to rebuild their communities when conflict is over. Education is the most important thing young refugees can carry with them as they cross borders, giving them the possibility to invest their skills and energies into building a more peaceful and secure future for their countries. So, as we work together in the coming months and years to achieve education for all, we have a collective responsibility to ensure this includes some of the most vulnerable children and youth in the world. Refugee, internally displaced, and stateless children, and children whose right to education has been compromised by war and insecurity. They are the keys to a secure and sustainable future, and their education matters for us all. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank the High Commissioner's support and also thank the UNHCR, who is one of the co-conveners of this important event. And now I would like to invite on stage the Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, Mr. Yannick Glemarec.
Your Excellencies, civil society leaders, dear colleagues from the UN family, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first to deeply thank our host, the government of Korea, for its warm hospitality and its wonderful organization of this landmark event. UN Women champions a truly transformative post-2015 development agenda that will change the unequal distribution of power, resources, and opportunities. As repeatedly stressed over the past 3 days, education is a fundamental part of this agenda. The success of the post-2015 development agenda will depend on our ability to achieve the proposed Sustainable Development Goal 4 and 5 and their ambitious targets. Education empowers girls and women to take full charge of their own lives and actively participate in the development of their communities and countries as both beneficiaries and agents of change. However, girls from rural areas, ethnic minorities, and indigenous groups continue to have the lowest levels of literacy and education. Studies show that women and girls face intersecting and cumulative forms of disadvantage and discrimination. To achieve quality education for all by 2030, we must make a concerted effort to remove all barriers to education for girls and adolescents, such as harmful social norms, early marriages, unsafe school, unequal distribution of care burden, and poverty. Gender equality in education goes beyond the classroom, and it goes beyond the issue of parity in education. It is about equality in the quality of education and equality in the socio-economic opportunities from education. It starts with recognizing that education is a fundamental human right for every girl and boy. As one of the 7 co-conveners of WEF 2015, UN Women is extremely pleased that the Incheon Declaration recognize the importance of gender equality in achieving the right to education for all, and commits to supporting gender-sensitive policies, planning and learning environment, mainstreaming gender issues in teacher training and curricula, and eliminating gender-based discrimination and violence in school. UN Women is committed to work with all of you to fulfill this ambitious and vital agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glemarec, for your remarks. We certainly would like to continue our cooperation in our efforts to promote gender equality in education. Thank you. Our next speaker is the Deputy Executive Director of UNICEF, Ms. Geeta Gupta, who is the close friend and also cooperator for UNESCO. Geeta, please.
Thank you, Mr. Tang. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished colleagues, Madam Bokova, my fellow UN colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to make a few final remarks on behalf of UNICEF at the end of these very hard days of work. Hard work made a little lighter because we share a common purpose. We are here together in Incheon because we envision a world in which all children everywhere have a right to education and get a fair chance to go to school, to learn the skills they need to thrive in the workplace and in life. A world in which success in education is measured by learning outcomes. A world in which children caught in conflict and disaster are provided a safe space for education so that they can rebuild their lives and those of their communities. A world in which investment is targeted to reach the most marginalized children, and a world in which education can break the vicious intergenerational cycle of inequity and disadvantage to propel a virtuous cycle that creates equal opportunities for children and thereby for growth and development for communities and entire nations. The Republic of Korea, our gracious host, provides a powerful example of the way equitable and effective investment in education can lead to exemplary learning outcomes for children and can raise the fortunes of an entire nation. In the months ahead, we must continue to come together, united in our commitment to a single agenda for education, Sustainable Development Goal number 4. In the intergovernmental process, we must bolster this goal with measurable and time-bound targets and indicators that will hold all of us accountable. Agreeing to a goal is one thing. Achieving it is quite another. And we will never achieve our vision for children if we do not focus on the rights and education of the world's most marginalized children, including those children who live in countries affected by conflict and other major crises. So let me end with a challenge. I challenge all of us to spend the next 15 years reaching the most vulnerable children with targeted education investments and interventions, with learning opportunities that prepare all children to thrive in a global economy and contribute to the peace and prosperity of their families, their communities, and the entire world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Geeta. We highly appreciate the cooperation of UNICEF and yourself. And now I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Hansen, Vice President of the World Bank Group, to come on stage to deliver his statement. You have the floor.
Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, Madam Director General of UNESCO, honorable ministers, our co-convening partners, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our President Jim Yong Kim and our entire team at the World Bank Group, I want to thank the government of the Republic of Korea for hosting this extraordinary forum. This is a watershed moment for the global education movement. With the Incheon Declaration, we are taking a landmark step on our behalf of the world's children and the world itself over the next generation. We are rightly shifting our ambitions for the next 15 years from not only education for all, but learning for all. We are saying today that by 2030, all children everywhere must be able to go to school and to reap the benefits of lifelong learning. But, as we have heard many times this week, there are an estimated 250 million children today who cannot read or write, despite many of them having attended many years of school. Think about that for a moment. If these children could band together and form a nation, it would be the fourth most populous country on earth, slightly larger than Indonesia, a vast virtual nation of children ill-equipped with even the most basic cognitive skills to enjoy the full flower of life as citizens and members of an economy and society. We can and must do better. So we are delighted that today the Incheon Declaration has strong and clear commitment to ensuring quality education and improving learning outcomes for all. Every child has the right to a quality education. To realize this right, we must ensure that every child has a safe learning environment, that we have well-trained, well-supported, and motivated teachers, and that children actually acquire the cognitive, the social, and the emotional skills they need to escape extreme poverty, to share in the benefits of economic growth, to fulfill their potential, and to pass on the intergenerational benefits to their own children. To realize this right, as the Declaration says, we must mobilize all available resources, and we must also ensure accountability for results. As President Kim announced earlier this week, the World Bank Group is committed to continue doing its part as the world's largest provider of official development assistance for education. We heard this week from the ministers of Haiti and Pakistan, Senegal and Tanzania about how they are using results-based approaches to expand access and improve learning outcomes. On the World Bank's part, as we announced, we will step up our support for results-based financing to enable countries to deliver the strongest possible public services in the interest of education. But along with finance, we're also committed to sharing global knowledge, to promoting, monitoring, and evaluation of programs, and to documenting what works, what doesn't, and why, so that resources can be used more and more effectively. It was heartbreaking to hear one country representative this week report that they had realized the only reason that parent satisfaction in his country was so high is that their expectations were so low. As the Honorable Minister from Tanzania said yesterday, we have to change our mindset of what is possible. The leaders who met a quarter century ago at Jomtien did not suffer low expectations. They set the bar high, and a decade later in Dakar, the standards were set even higher. Today in Incheon, the baton has been passed to us, and this will be the difficult, longest, and yet most important and influential lap of this race. So let us leave this hall not walking, but running, because we have no time to waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. The increased funding announced by your president, by the World Bank, will certainly help the member states to implement the new agenda for the education in the future. Thank you very much. C'est maintenant avec grand plaisir que nous souhaitons la bienvenue à Madame Incheon, secrétaire générale de la francophonie. Madame secrétaire générale, vous avez la parole.
Monsieur le vice-premier ministre, et ministre de l'Éducation de la
Education
République
Minister
de
for the
Corée,
Republic of Korea,
Madame la directrice,
Director General of UNESCO,
Mesdames et Messieurs,
distinguished ministers,
Excellences,
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
merci
I would like to thank the Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Education. I would like to thank the Republic of Korea for having hosted us so generously, so attentively for this World Education Forum, a forum which we owe first of all to UNESCO and its Director General, whose unswerving commitment in favor of education and culture is lost on none of us. I would like once again, dear Irina Bokova, congratulate you and thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, how many esteemed men and women of goodwill are meeting here today? We are all convinced that education is the #1 priority. We are all ready to act and to commit ourselves. But what brings us together in this room is a same concern. I am worried, I'm concerned. Time is of the essence. The young people whom we're thinking of, and of whom we have been speaking throughout the forum, have never been so many in number. There have never been so many young people in the entire history of mankind. And what do we have to offer them? That's the question that they ask themselves day in, day out. They express themselves, and they express a feeling of being at a dead end. They are impatient, they are disenchanted, and they are frustrated. I'm also thinking, and I'm sure you are too, of all these young men and women who face death on floating coffins and who are prey to gangsters, to smugglers, to traffickers, who murderously exploit their dream of a better life. I am also, and so are you, thinking of all these young men and women who are angry, who are distressed, who in their quest for identity and for belonging are lured by other banksters to commit the irreparable or to be the victims thereof on behalf of an ideology of terror and hatred, an ideology of destruction and of death that leaves us all baffled. When will we finally understand that to be so desperate at 12 years of age or 15 or 20 is an aberration? Time is of the essence. We are engaged in a race against time. We have to give them back the reasons to hope. You've heard from them. You've met them, as have I. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We know how powerful their creativity is. We know how much they want to become involved, to outdo themselves, to undertake. So let's not leave to other people the dire project of exploiting this formidable energy to divert it. Let's take action. Let's transmit to these young generations the knowledge, the skills, the values that will allow them to become architects of their own lives and to transform the world. In this combat, because it is a combat, education is a weapon of mass construction. To invest in education means to invest in world stability. It means investing in international prosperity. States, donors, international organizations, and enterprises must invest in education.
We are all responsible, we're all accountable for failures as well as for successes. We must all become involved in a participatory and inclusive way with civil society and with young people themselves. We have set a goal for ourselves here at Incheon at the invitation of UNESCO, a goal that we will not forget. We've done this diligently through the declaration adopted and which the Francophonie fully espouses. That is a good thing. Now we have to pool our experience and our expertise. We have to share our best practices in the north as in the south. We must coordinate and rationalize our activities. We must conceive of partnerships and innovative financing. We must favor synergies for greater effectiveness, for a greater impact, and for more concrete results. We need to cooperate otherwise in a new way. The circumstances demand that. Let us stop at nothing. The circumstances demand that. It is in this sense that Francophonie has been mobilizing. It is a bridge between 80 states and governments on the 5 continents. And we are aware that every year lost endangers lives. Every year lost endangers the world. Mahatma Gandhi quite rightly said that the difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing would solve many of the problems of this world. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let's do everything we are capable of. We owe that to all these children, to all these young people. Let's not wait. Time waits for no one. Thank you very much.
Madame Secrétaire Générale, merci beaucoup pour votre intervention. Now it's an honor for me to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Hwang Woo-yeol. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Hwang. The Minister is going to speak in Korean, so you can turn to channel 2 of your headphone.
Honorable Director General Irina Bokova of UNESCO, ministers and delegates of participant countries, representatives from various international organizations and civil society organizations from around the world, and all distinguished guests and participants. I would like to take this opportunity to express my deep gratitude to all the organizations organizing the WEF, including the UNESCO, UNICEF, the UNFPA, the UNDP, UN Women, the UNHCR, and the World Bank Group. And thanks to your efforts, we have once again been able to reaffirm a commitment to education in 15 years. During the past 3 days, we have shared our expectations and pulled our wisdom together to establish the education development goals that will lead the world for the next 15 years. The active support and dedication for education you have shown throughout this forum will be a great catalyst for a better future for humanity and the happiness of all children all around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, as all of us agree, education is the key driver of both individual happiness and social development. And it's the most efficient, valuable investment we can make. In whatever our circumstances a person was born, education ensures social equity and is a ladder of hope that prevents polarization. It overcomes conflict and division and is a bridge unifying society. So education is the most fundamental right, ensuring happiness and driver of individual growth and social development. 15 years ago, when UNESCO and the international community gathered to initiate the Education for All initiative to guarantee everyone's right to education, we had recognized the critical importance of education. And even now, as we aim for 2030, our conviction still remains strong. Based on this notion, after a 3-day-long effort, through which we reflect on our past, our education agenda, we are now preparing an innovative global agenda for the next 15 years, as well as the Incheon Declaration, which contains implementary strategies. The tasks that we have agreed today will take various forms on the ground around the world, and it will help us realize the dream of inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning for all. So our hopes will be realized and lay the foundation for our peace and development in each of our countries and the international community as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, as it has already been emphasized throughout the forum many times, for Korea, education is indeed very special. Coupled with Korean people's zeal for education, the government spared no effort in investing in an education, leading to the fostering of great talent throughout society. Korea has managed to overcome the despair of war and poverty based on education to finally achieve remarkable national development. As a country that knows the importance of education very well, it was especially meaningful to host this forum and to able to conclude it successfully. Korea will continue to fully support the initiatives to ensure that all the goals set during this forum will be fulfilled. Korea will also actively join the international community in guaranteeing a right to quality education in better conditions for all learners around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me express my sincere gratitude for all your endeavors and passion shown during the past few days, and Korea will continue to stay committed to its responsibilities in the global education arena. There is an African proverb that bringing up one child requires the mobilization of the entire village. Now we have to go beyond one village towards the entire global village, the entire world, which has become one village, and we all have to lead in bringing up one child. I would like to thank you for the positive assessments you have made on the achievements of the Korean education system. But Korea will continue to share with the world the wisdom it has earned from its experience as well as reflections it has gained from reflecting on its avoidable mistakes to resolve and solve newly raised expectations and demands from the education arena. Korea will exert effort so that education realizes happiness of individuals and fosters talents contributing to global citizenship. I hope that your stay in Korea, including the WEF, was happy and special. I hope that it was a memorable stay. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias. Shukran jazilan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your kind word, Mr. Vice Prime Minister. Finally, to close the World Education Forum 2015, it's my honor to welcome the Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Irina Bokova, who will pronounce the closing speech of this historic event.
Monsieur le vice-premier ministre de la République de Corée,
Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea and Minister of Education, Michael Jean, Secretary General for Francophonie, Juliette Gilliard, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Global Partnership for Education, Susan Hopgood, President of Education International, Ambassador Mohamed, Sameh, Chairman of the UNESCO Executive Board and the Permanent Delegate of Egypt to UNESCO, dear Dr. Singh, a Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, dear friend Georg, Kell from the Global Compact, dear partners of the UN system, dear Mohamed, Special Advisor and for this 2015 agenda, the General Secretary of the UN. Thank you, distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen. We have been awaiting this moment for a long time, and we've all worked very hard to arrive. It is a watershed. In 15 years, we will say that it was a tipping point in world education policies. The Education for All movement was born in 1990 in Jamtien, Thailand. The movement gained momentum in 2000 in Dakar, Senegal. Today in Incheon, the Republic of Korea, more than 130 ministers of education from the world over, but also representatives of civil society, multi- and bilateral organizations, the private sector, and other partners have traced a new road toward a better future for us all, based on education as the greatest force for transforming our lives and our societies. Throughout the world, in the developed countries, in the developing countries, in times of peace and during conflict situations, women, children, and men are all demanding the same thing. They are demanding an education. They are demanding the respect for this fundamental human right. They are demanding respect for their dignity. We would like to make this World Forum in Incheon a sounding board for the education of the future, to have all these voices heard, to listen to them, and to respond to them. The Declaration of Incheon expresses this vision, and it sets the conditions to make them a reality throughout the world, to ensure that every child, every young person, every adult has equal access to an inclusive, quality education. Education for all set the stage. It set a humanistic objective of incomparable scope. Education 2030 should finish the task and meet new challenges. We have set forth very clear guidelines for action on the basis of our experience to reach the most vulnerable populations, to improve the quality of learning, to offer lifelong learning opportunities, to help each and every one better to adapt to a world in constant upheaval. We can only meet these challenges if we act together. And that, in fact, is the greatest strength of the Incheon Declaration.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Incheon Declaration sets a new vision of education for the 21st century. Education must be about literacy and numeracy, knowledge and skills for today and tomorrow. It must also be about learning to live in a world under pressure. It must be about cultural literacy on the basis of respect and equal dignity. It must be about laying the foundations for a culture of peace. It must be about connecting the dots between the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. We must respond to the demands of societies, to the needs of markets, and more fundamentally, to the aspiration of every person to transform his or her life through education. We must respect the dignity, rights, and aspirations of every woman and man, of every child. This agenda is expressed in the framework of action. This new vision requires enhanced learning environments, new forms of learning, and innovative models of delivery. To succeed, we need a new emphasis on teachers. We need greater financing for education, both domestic and external. We need stronger education systems. We need more partnerships for innovation. We need sharper monitoring, follow-up, and evaluation. And most of all, we need commitment of governments across the world to lead the change. This is, I believe, the message of Incheon. And this is what we will carry forward on to the Oslo Summit, to the Financing for Development Conference in Ethiopia, and most important, to the United Nations Summit in September. Our vision is firm and clear, so is our determination. Allow me to thank each of you for your commitment, and most of all, I thank again the government of the Republic of Korea for its exemplary leadership and its wonderful hospitality. I thank you for entrusting UNESCO to lead and coordinate this new agenda through partnership, through collective action, through effective implementation. And we will do so with our hearts on fire. This is the message of Education 2030. Thank you, and I wish all us a great success.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is conclude the World Education Forum 2015 in Incheon. But before I let you go, I have two things to announce. The first thing is the firework dinner hosted by the mayor of the city of Incheon will be held next door at 6:30. Don't miss it. Second thing I want to say is our distinguished speakers have a thanks everybody. I would suggest let's make a big applause to ourselves for the solidarity and hard work we have demonstrated in the last 3 days. Thank you so much. Have a good journey home.